You're watching Lore of the Internet, and this is 13 stories of people catching their spouse cheating. Came back from a trip 4 hours early. Wife was supposed to be at work still. Opened up the front door to see her sitting topless on the couch making out with a coworker. He ran out the door, she ran into the bathroom and locked the door. Sat on the couch for about an hour because I couldn't think of what else to do. Finally just up and left so she could come out of the bathroom and put a shirt on. Chivalrous to the end, no less. Me and my girlfriend were long distance and she had a habit of going quiet sometimes. She'd been texting me for the last few weeks but had made excuses to not come visit. I went to a party that a friend had organized. I met a friend of his who told me that he had a new girlfriend. I was surprised he hadn't mentioned her, so I asked who she was. This lady introduced me to my girlfriend. She told everyone that we'd broken up and had been dating my friend for about a month. She didn't bother telling me. I'm with you, fellas. My ex-fiancée did that shit. Not only did she tell her coworkers that she was single, she would ask me to come visit her at work, take her out to lunch, and then when she was asked about why her ex was around, she'd lie saying that I was stalking her and wouldn't leave her alone. We lived together. That was when I remembered that her ex wouldn't stop stalking her when we first started dating. That was a sickening epiphany to realize that she had lied at the beginning and made me the other man. I had thought the worst of this dude and he didn't have any more of an idea than I did about what was going on. When he and I had a tense face-off, he just said, "One day, she's gonna do this to you too." I thought he was just talking shit. And it turns out, he was looking out for me more than anyone. Then to find out the woman I loved and lived with was framing me as the crazed, abusive partner. Makes me sick to my stomach for weeks after that betrayal. Shit was so fucked up that to this day I don't know whether she was telling the truth or lying about being diagnosed with a pathological lying problem, and could have just been saying that to deflect blame. Anyway, here's Wonderwall. One of my former coworkers loaded an SD card with a scanned project file on it. He put it into the conference room PC where we were treated to naked pictures of his wife fucking another guy. We were just stunned. This was in a senior budgetary meeting with outside accountants and auditors. And he was sitting right there and we were looking at his wife and another guy going at it. I reached over and shut off the projector. Nobody said anything. He got up, walked out, and drove off in his car. Left his phone and his laptop sitting on the table. He wound up driving to his parents' house 3 states away and he was gone for a week. Had my suspicions for a couple months, but no evidence of anything. My ex lived about 40 miles from me and we were 18. Dated and went to high school together for 3 years. She would come down into the city on weekends to spend time with me. I knew she had another group of friends in her town and a few of them were guys, which didn't bother me. But I woke up in the middle of the night and messaged her on Facebook only to notice that she had been tagged in a photo with one of her friends. He was holding her up and kissing her. It was his new profile picture. I messaged the guy and calmly asked what was going on. He immediately responded and was confused. We decided to meet up for coffee the next morning that my ex was over, and the look on her face was priceless when she saw him walk in and sit beside me. She begged for our forgiveness and claimed she loved us both. Turned out it had been going on for 7 months, and that every time she left my place during the weekends, she was returning home for him the next week. Me and the other guy are now best friends and share a house with my fiancé and his girlfriend. Fuck you, Taylor. He gave my number to his side chick in case of an emergency and she accidentally called me instead of him. I met this girl who was working the late shift at a drugstore. We'd flirted a few times and eventually exchanged numbers and started sleeping together. After a few weeks, she invited me to go drinking at this crampy little bar she liked in the north side of the city, so we spend the night dancing together, drinking, and talking to people she knows. Eventually, a guy comes up to me saying, "Great to meet you finally, congratulations on the engagement." "What are you talking about?" I replied, laughing as I choked on my drink a bit. The guy just gives me a quizzical look and says, "You're here with Corey. It's Paul, right?" I raised an eyebrow and pointed a thumb to my chest stating, "Nah man, name's Kyle." We stared at each other, watching each other realize what was playing out on this faithful night. Corey was engaged to a guy named Paul. I was the other guy. Paul worked out of town for weeks at a time. was actually interesting how you could literally see the word travel around the small bar, drastically changing the vibe of the room. We left shortly after. She brought me, the guy she was cheating on her fiancé with, to her favorite bar. She brought me to a place full of friends that knew her well enough to at least know that she was engaged to a guy named Paul and not Kyle. Messed up stuff. Didn't see her again after that. According to Facebook, Paul and Corey are currently married. Not me, but a medical resident who I met on rotation recently. One of the nicest guys I ever met, super intelligent and hardworking, and training to become a trauma surgeon, about as humble as they come. He had been married for 2 years to his wife. One night he gets off a 30-hour call early and heads home to surprise his wife with some flowers and her favorite dessert. It was their anniversary of the day they first met, only to find her in bed with a random dude. He was so exhausted and confused he didn't know what to do and just left and went back to the hospital. I saw him at 5 a.m. sitting in the parking lot hunched over crying. He didn't even have his phone with him, he was just sitting there. Man, nothing breaks your heart more than seeing a grown man cry. It's not something you see often. We called up his dad and he came and picked him up. The guy ended up taking a leave of absence from his residency. Turns out it wasn't his wife's first time sleeping around. I hope he gets back on his feet. He will make an amazing physician. Walked in on my girlfriend while she was having sex with another guy. What are you doing here? She said. You gave me a key, remember? I ended up not working today and wanted to surprise you. 15 years later, she reaches out and leaves me a message that she'd like to talk. I figure she's doing some sort of 12-step thing or something and wants to make amends. Nope, she wanted to try and sell me on Amway. Found my wife's notebook. Written on the first page was a 10-step plan detailing how she was going to leave me for another guy. I turned it into one step. Early 2000s, my friend's husband deployed to Iraq. Together they had a 10-year-old son and a happy marriage. One day while he was deployed, I am at home when another of our friends calls and screams, "Holy shit, turn on the news right now." I turn it on to watch a human interest story about a fundraiser at a high school 30 miles away. They're doing a relay for life or something, and as a surprise to one of the participants, they had her husband and father of her 2 grade school children do a video call from Iraq, and displayed it on the football jumbotron. There on local news is my friend's husband telling another woman and 2 kids how he loves them and can't wait to get back home to them. The news eats it up about what a great guy he is. That night, our group of friends convened and decided how we would tell her. I was nominated, and the next day I had to sit her down and tell her what we saw. She called the news station and they were happy to let her come in and watch the story. They were also incredibly apologetic. Story has somewhat a crappy ending, I'm afraid. She called him out on his BS, they started divorce proceedings, and he went on to legally marry the mother of his other kids and mostly ignored his son from the first marriage. I returned from work on Christmas Eve. We had tickets to a festival which started the day before New Year's Eve, and I couldn't find the tickets anywhere after seeing them the month before. I decided to double check the trash before we put out the collection, and I found a used condom. We lived on our own. But did you ever find the tickets? College girlfriend and we lived together for a year after I realized she would always have her phone on silent or just plain ignore calls from Jennifer. One day I write down the number and call it a week later. It ends up being her other boyfriend who she had never broken up with before she came to college. Neither of us knew about each other and she had been visiting him when she went home to see her parents on some weekends and breaks. Broke up soon after, and her mom said that sometimes you just have to accept things, and how I owed her an apology for breaking up with her. It gets worse, but that was the gist. How does it get worse? She was a stripper, no strip clubs in Tally, so they come to you. Who I found out banged a client, and some frat dude cheated on me a week before my birthday after I had bought tickets for us to go on a cruise. Didn't find out until after. Had a weird relationship with her female best friend who I found out she was fucking also, even though she called me crazy for even suggesting that something was up. Invited me over to talk a day after she got her own place and found a condom wrapper in the bed. Later I found out she had fucked her neighbor on the first day she was there. She also borrowed a ridiculous amount of money that she never paid back. She ended up reaching out to me years later when she moved to Texas after her new guy beat her and got her evicted from her office. A friend of hers said that she could get weed from her cousin, so she started chilling with some fake thugs out there. Called me at 4 a.m. because they had gotten pulled over and the guys didn't have a license but had guns and drugs with them. She said she had to shove the drugs up her snatch and wanted me to come get her. I said, call a cab. A week later, she tells me her grandpa wanted to see me. He lived close and remembered me as the boyfriend. So I go by and she's obviously fucked up on pills, but no one notices. She said the guys she had gotten pulled over with were giving her free pills because they felt sorry for her in pulled over situation. I tell her that's not how that works and nothing is for free and to stop hanging out with them. Of course, she knows what she's doing. A few years later, I get another phone call with her screaming, crying, begging me to come get her out of some budget motel. Apparently she kept hanging out with the dudes and they drugged her, took turns with her, then left her there. She passed out and woke up naked. I freak out and say call the cops, but she just wants me to smoke her out and take her to her car. I told her I didn't have any and I'd just take her to either her house or car. She freaks out and starts screaming at the top of her lungs, punching my car and windows while we're driving down the highway. Longer story short, she left a week later to go back to the old boyfriend who beat her, got pregnant, he dumped her, and she moved to New York City to be closer to his other baby mama in hopes he'll be forced to deal with her too. If anyone has any similar stories, feel free to share them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this content, feel free to like or subscribe. Until then, we'll see you in the next video.